Yeah. So what would be the greatest way that I could experience this unlimitedness that I pray about every day?
Yeah, just enjoy it, my dear friend. You see, you can't put it in a bottle, and you can't give it a name. Ultimately, part of the plan as you grow into greater and greater love is as you are on a quest for love. Suddenly, you become that, and no longer are you seeking it, but you're just the full expression of it.
Hey, brother, thank you for being here, sir. It's really nice to have you. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you, Michael. It's a nice invitation to always talk about this stuff. That is what I think both of us are really excited to probably spend every day talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This has become, everything in my life in terms of creating a place for myself in the world that is unique to myself, and, coming from a space of, blending into mass consciousness to a position in my life where I'm ready to actually, navigate my own path and express my own unique individuality and my own gifts into the world, and certainly to have the opportunity to align with human beings like yourself who are courageous enough to step out of their own boxes and be willing to share the things that they're learning, the things that they're passionate about, and different ways that we can help empower others to live an authentic life as well. So,
yeah, I think that's the era that we're living in for sure. And as we know, we start attracting the people that are on the same, let's call it, resonance. And if we just stay tuned with that, we don't need to worry about what's coming next. It's just about what's happening now and what life brings you. So even this opportunity to talk to you, I feel it like that. I have, I just know that this is part of my path, and I enjoy every second whenever I can, because that's, I think that has been my goal, which again, we can talk about if you want, but that's been my main goal so far in this whole trajectory. So yeah, just connecting with people like you it's always a gift.
Lovely. So I came across your work, I want to say maybe a month ago, and it was just something came up on my Spotify feed, and I saw Law of One, and I was on a spiritual path from the early 2000s before I had my awakening in around 2013. And I was kind of directed to give my life to God, and through I had asked a question at work: how could I find this inner peace? And it was the first time I heard a clairaudient message in my head, and she said, "Give your life to God." And I laughed, and I was like, "How am I supposed to do that?" Mm-hmm. And so a few months later, I've told this story before, I came across a book called Putting on the Mind of Christ, and I read it, and I was like, in my early 20s, I was super inspired. I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. I need to put on the mind of Christ. I need to develop a relationship with love to be the fullest expression of love in a physical human body. And so then I went on my journey through this ability to like fully come forward vibrationally in vulnerability, in an open heart, and just really like loving people truly. And I found that the other piece that I needed in terms of behaviorally and through the contemplative work to move through my limiting belief systems was that I would seek out material that had the least amount of distortion. And so I found if I had the ability to quiet the mind, I could only quiet the mind through simplicity. That was my path. And so I found that I'd bought hundreds of books over the years, but there was only a handful of books that I actually read because they had the least amount of distortion available to help me weed through my limiting belief systems, to ultimately quiet my mind and allow spirit to fully come forward in my embodiment, if you will. And there was a handful of books, and most of them were channeled, that I felt had the least amount of distortion available. And one of those sets of books was The Law of One, which I found to be profoundly complex in certain ways through the language that was being used and the frameworks. But it was one that in probably the late 2000s, I ended up buying all 4 books and studying those. Some of the other ones were the Seth material from Jane Roberts. I don't know if you're familiar, but that was probably my favorite teacher. Right. And so, yeah, mostly it was like channeled material that I utilized as a tool to simplify my consciousness. One of the few individuals whose work profoundly influenced me as well was Paramahansa Yogananda, who came from India in the early 1900s. And so his work and his autobiography was extremely inspiring as well. But my point is that Law of One material, that's what I came across your podcast and heard you kind of doing a little like narrative, of the different sessions. And man, just happy to reach out and see that you responded and that you're open and willing to connect. So it's actually something that's very unique in our current times, because I find that human beings, and maybe this is just a part of that worldly success piece, is if you don't have a certain amount of followers or you don't have a certain amount of an audience, that there's this tendency for folks to kind of ignore until there's like a certain alignment in terms of influence in the world. And I always find that really interesting because of, where I'm at in my own unfolding, and how much, and maybe it is energetically, but how much kind of people get caught up in that old worldly framework of value systems and limitations and things. And I don't know, I'm probably going off on a tangent here, but I was very happy to see that you responded and that you were interested in doing the show. So.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that phenomenon, which is part of our society's culture right now, which is to feel sort of inferior, or that you need to accomplish a certain goal or amount of followers, like you said. That those are the keywords now, right? Right. And of course, we know that this is as unreal and I don't want to use the word fake, but it goes around there, that it's not about the amount of people, right? And funny enough, when you're telling me this, I'm thinking about Ra's answer to Don, because Don was asking within the Law of One, I think it was around session 30 something or 40, where Don was concerned about the amount of people they could reach with this material. And they had issues with the publisher, because the publisher was, he wasn't happy with the language that was used in the raw material, of course, because they said, nobody's going to understand this. Nobody cares about this. So Don was kind of troubled. And then Ra simply said, forget about the amount of people that are going to read your material. I mean, we came here to talk to you, not even to, it is your desire to make a book out of it. And that's great. That's your service. But for us, if it helps, it's only about you. If one person is enlightened, then everybody is enlightened, right?
Yeah, it makes me want to cry.
And one of the things that is beautiful too is that I call it the entity that is LNL Research. They have actually sustained this notion, this idea throughout however long it's been, 40 something years, right? I have to say, I don't usually use the word humble that much because of the connotations that we have, but yeah, they represent what we would consider at the deepest level the true humble behavior, right? I mean, people like us who dive into this material and realize the potential that is there, and the immensity of all the things that you can continue to extract over the years. And you would think this would be a lot more popular. And speaking, in the same vein of popularity, they're not popular at all. They're pretty obscure. They don't do any campaigns. They're just an organization and their job is to maintain the channeling, the information, the libraries, as they call them, as pristine as possible for people to access them at their own will. So you see, I think they, since we're talking about the law of one, not only as Ra said back then in the 80s, but even now the people who are still in charge, which is, it's not Jim McCarthy kind of retired already, but he's still involved. Gary Bean and Austin Bridges, who I have an awesome relationship with, they are fantastic at keeping this in a humble way, and they don't care to spread the information. They really don't. They are sort of guardians of the information. So I think that in the same way, we in our attempts to divulge this information, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that we're being guardians of the information that is given to us. You see, like Ross says, things don't come to positive beings, but through them. So whatever comes through us is what we should, become kind of just guardians of that. Like I said, stalwarts, guardians of our own information. And I think that's the beauty of knowing that we are impulsed to do this kind of work.
Yeah, well, I think absolutely. And I think that folks that are really committed to knowing love, it comes from the most sincere, the most authentic, the most compassionate space available. And I think that is that unfolding of love, is that compassion and that humility. I mean, I can tell you, at least from my perspective and my unfolding, was that there's a certain amount of selflessness that's required for us to awaken our deepest self. And there's a self-surrendering that necessitates that kind of that unfolding that would allow us to kind of channel, or to be a channel, or to be, like you said, inspired, or to allow whatever it is, our purpose, to move through us with the least amount of distortion available, with the least amount of mental filters, with the least amount of biases. And part of that unfolding is working through our limiting belief systems and our grudges and our biases, and allowing ourselves to move out of the way as individuals so that love can do its work through us. But I've also found, and part of my work in helping to bring spirituality to mass consciousness, is that there's a recognition and there's an equal value between that mystical selflessness and self-surrender and unity, God consciousness, and the individual through which we develop that enables us to do that type of work. So there's like this equal, there's an equal amount of validity that needs to be given to the individual who is seeking to experience unity consciousness, and then the individual on that path is seeking to self-actualize one's individual stream of consciousness. And so it's a very, I think, complex topic to try to explain to people, and much in the same way that I think the law of one material is very much what's the word I'm looking for? Paradoxical. It's a paradox. I mean, if we really dive into the nature of individuality, which is the tool and the framework for spiritual evolution, it is equally, it has equal amount of merit and validity in the physical reality that we're experiencing, as does this energy that pervades all of us, and is essentially what we are, which is beyond the individual, right?
Yeah. I like to describe it as, and you would know that my direction with my investigation, I would just call it that, Mike. That when I started this path, what really motivated my seeking was investigation. You see, I mean, many other things motivated my seeking, mainly, the wonders of the universe and the basis of creation. But at the heart, there was always sort of the backbone was investigation. I wanted to investigate. I wanted to know in that scientific paradigm that I grew up with. I didn't grow up with religion, spirituality, or anything. I just went straight into science, and that was just my belief system, actually. Yeah. And so with the same mindset, I began to investigate this, that was consciousness, right? And so my direction was into learning the self, because that's a concept that to me was something. I am me. That's it. I'm pretty sure I know who I am. So that brought me into a halt when I realized that I can't answer that question. And the way I like to see it, from my own experience, is that there was a sort of identity. That's what you call the limiting belief systems. That there is an identity that is built upon perception. Perception is separation. There is no perception without sort of separation of objects, form, what we call in Buddhism, right? And so perception gives you the illusion that you are also a limited object. Sure. So that's the beginning, right? That's the ignorance that we know, ignorance in the sense of Buddhist tradition. That we are unaware, right? It's not ignorance as stupidity, but just unawareness. And I think that's the best synonym that we have. So all of that is constructed there. It's our identity, is who we think we are, right? That's the ego, the image of the self, and so on. I like to just call it the separate self. And in this junction of our lives, when we find something else, in both of our cases, it has been just this call, like you said, and I love it, give your life to God. I mean, I would have heard that 4 or 5 years ago, and I would have said, that sounds like sacrificing myself for God, right? Right. And it is true. You do sacrifice yourself, but who are you to be sacrificed? Well, the illusory self. Right. And so that's the junction that I call, when you meet this unstoppable force, if you want to use that phrase, that is the energy of the self being recognized, right? Because it's not that it's manifesting. It's always been there, but it's now you're becoming aware of that. And so that impetus of this force is so strong that it will obliterate this phantasmagoria that we have of identity. And so that's the struggle, right, that we go through, and we have to go through the process of finding our limitations and how we have dark nights of the soul and all of that, right? So yes, in a way, there is a self that is being sort of revealed, much like shadows are being taken away by the sun, by the sunrise. So sure. It's just light that is showing what's been there. The shadow is only being covering that which was there. And so now that there is this, you can call it, if you want to sound poetic, the dawn of enlightenment or awakening. Sure. And that reveals something else. And you see, one of the fears that I deal with a lot of people who are just in the beginning process of self-realization is that they feel that they're going to lose everything that they are, all the things that they cherish and what they appreciate and so on. Sure. But the truth is that the only thing that you lose are those things that you're struggling with, those things that cause you frustration and anger and sadness and so on. Right. And
our attachment to those things. Yeah.
Yes, which is correct. Is the behaviors that we have to believe that those are inherent part of ourselves. And what is revealed is just simply that you become who you are, actually, that that natural spontaneous you is it's liberated, right? It's like the child. That's why we have so much inner child work nowadays and that kind of stuff, because all we have is a child that has been repressed, but that child contains the universe there, right?
Sure.
And so when it became apparent to itself that it had to become an image, it repressed a lot of stuff. So that's why we call healing the inner child. But that the beauty of the inner child is that, there is spontaneity there, and spontaneity has nothing to do with the ego. You see, the ego cannot be there. The limited self, the separate self, cannot be involved in spontaneity. So this is the reason why you may be aware that I'm in love with Zen Buddhism of all the Eastern traditions. I love non-duality in general, but any tradition is Zen. And in Zen, all that is emphasized is that you become or be. It's not become, but just be spontaneous in all your actions and all your answers. And that's it. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just being spontaneous, right? And it's so hard. So, yeah, those are the two things, or the way that I describe it, how, there is a part of us that is now being revealed because the light's being shown upon it. And then there is the old self that we thought we were, and that it's painful to let go because, like you said, the word attachment, we're attached to that. And, it's our free will, as you know, to let go or to keep attaching to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And those comfort, those frameworks from which we operate from are places that make us feel secure, and they help. Those intellectual frameworks that we utilize as a sense of identity are what, in many instances, they shield us from feeling that repressed pain. And the actualization of the spirit in the body, really more than anything, is a removal of those blockades, so that the energy or the light or the love or the truth that we are, from a life force perspective, is allowed to stream through the individual and to express itself, like you said, spontaneously, in a very uninhibited, undistorted manner. And I think really more than anything, that is what self-actualization is. And I believe it's a continual process. And when people are operating from the limited or the local mind, the ego identity, and they're grasping or they're moving towards a place of seeking, like, a sense of enlightenment or unity consciousness, there's always this intellectualization of what unity means. And so the fear is to intellectualize what unity consciousness means. And so there has to be an understanding that certainly when you tap into the frequency of unity consciousness, there is a kind of a realization that you are the abiding observer. You are love. You are God. You are truth. You are, you are it. You are I am. You whatever. But there's a return as well back into the operating ego, which is the driver who has to facilitate whatever it is that has been revealed, and whatever it is that we are here to do, to support kind of, our spiritual evolution, and whether that's service to others, in terms of the types of things that you and I are doing, or whether that's just, cultivating a garden in your backyard. I mean, whatever. We all have a different purpose here, and I think it's just really important for people to understand that that the truth is much simpler than many times we give it credit, right? And the complicate. What I think is, like, truth is both. It's complex, but it's simple. The reality of the mass consciousness is you have a lot of people that are just complicated, and they're complicated because they're kind of stuck in their head. They're stuck in their beliefs. They're stuck in their resistance patterns. They're stuck in the fear. They're stuck in the insecurity. We're stuck in all of these different, ways that have, society has been constructed in order to operate from the persona level versus the actual authentic emotional, core whatever self. So
yeah, there's a couple of things that I can just add on to what you just beautifully explained, especially the path of going back to the self, to unity consciousness, which is simply you. You are unity consciousness, and how you get in touch with that is just, your own game, how you enjoy it most. And it shouldn't be a struggle, it should never be a struggle. This is a path that should be enjoyed. But there are reasons why, of course, there is still, I call it simply extrapolating the old habits of the self brought to the spiritual path, meaning that you need to struggle to go. And that's okay. That's why we have so many methodologies, right? But yeah, it need not be complex, like you just, again, beautifully explained. It is simple. It's only that the simplicity of it baffles the complex mind or the complex thought patterns that we have, that to achieve something of that degree, which is promising so much in my life, there must be a tremendous amount of work involved in it, right? And that, in fact, that thought is what complicates things, because it dismisses the possibility of it being like Ross says. Ross says, we cannot teach enlightenment, or nobody can teach enlightenment to other, or show enlightenment. Enlightenment is of the moment, and it's from the self, by the self, for the self. So I see, especially in the work that I do with people, that the biggest problem is that, and I mean, I recognize in myself, I know it was an experience for me that was just, I cannot believe that it's this simple, and there needs to be more. And the other thing that I would add to what you were saying, in terms of people, is that, you see, I mean, there are different ways to see this. I think the most localized way I can see this collectively is as a whole mind. You see, there is, although it is true that we have an individual mind, obviously, when we look at the behavior of people, like you were saying, in general, in regards to this path, I see it mostly, Mike, as it's a whole planet that is becoming aware of itself, right? It's, yes, we measure individuality in us, but there is no individuality. These are, if you can equate it to, I mean, I can do it with myself. Everybody might be different, but the amount of thoughts that I had directed towards consciousness, pure consciousness, at the beginning of my process were very limited, if any of them, right? So they're very erratic. Over time, they have, I can measure an increase of time spent in this awareness, in this abidance in awareness. So if in me it has taken this amount of time, and it will take the rest of my life, as you also rightfully said, that it's an ongoing process to let the conscious mind sink into itself, then the planet responds the same way. But you see, the way we measure our mind is with thoughts. The way we measure the planet's mind is with what we call people. That's why also Ross says, your thoughts, you're not people. Your thoughts, and this is just on the planetary scale, right? The planetary scale is it's just this, but it's family, it's home, it's this, and we will see this over time. There's going to be more thoughts, more people becoming aware, and we need not judge the thoughts or the people, right? So we just let them be the way they are, and because there is a complexity that I can't even graze on it, which is the massive rearrangement of consciousness that needs to happen coming from such a limited, I mean, even now you're aware, just 20 years ago, the amount of unconsciousness that we had socially, against people. You know, it's almost like slavery, right? Like slavery to us sounds like that's absurd. How could we do that? You know, 20 years ago, we were still acting in ways that now it sounds to us like brutal or completely primitive.
Yeah, well, and the beautiful thing too is like the internet is like a representation of the mind of God, and so we were given that beautiful opportunity for us to recognize that in the background of our awareness is this interconnected fabric of reality where everything is operating in this profound mosaic of beauty and love and intelligence. And so the internet has kind of provided us this framework for that communication on a physical level as a representation of how we communicate on a spiritual level that most of us are unfamiliar with, or we don't discern, you know, meaning, you know, we go to sleep at night, and many times, you know, we're reconnecting with our higher self, or we're connecting with other people that we're going to, you know, facilitate certain experiences in the physical reality. And so like in the background of our operating system is this just profound mosaic of just like love and truth. And it's just this dance that people get so wrapped up in the physical experience that they don't recognize that behind that, this physical experience is just, you know, it's like we're on stage, you know, taking on a body is like, you know, we're in a play, you know, we play a specific character, we're doing, you know, specific things in that play for that period of time. But then, you know, when the curtain comes down and this life's over, then we go back to this space that is just only present moment, this space of just like truth and unity. The non-physical realms is our home, is where we all are one. There are many mansions, you know, based on, you know, a frequency and the like, but ultimately, you know, the physical universe is just a slowing down of vibration. So little baby gods and co-creators like us can actually have the time to contemplate our creations, and we could evolve spiritually, right? So, I mean, the physical reality is really no different than the spiritual realms. It's just a slowing down of frequency that is enabling us a playground to, I think, evolve ourselves as, you know, and that's probably going into the densities of the law of one, and kind of it's talking about how, you know, we move from this place where like the creator wanted to know itself and always possible, you know, started laying out the framework for physical reality, and over time, right, the evolution of biology, and then consciousness and self-consciousness, and then us moving into the fourth density of where we're learning the lessons of love is understanding. And I think that's basically where, you know, we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius from an astrological sense, but from a larger sense, we're moving into a brand new density. And that's not just a 2,500 year cycle of the age of Aquarius, which is very much a humanitarian energy, but we're moving into a brand new density in terms of there's a brand new theme on Earth, which is, okay, we've become self-aware, and now we're transitioning into a space of learning the lessons of love. And what is love? Love is understanding. Love is compassion. Love is the ability to recognize the inherent limited nature of the logical mind, of the concrete mind. It has some inherent limitations. And so how can we develop our logical mind, our virtue, our conscience, our, you know, how can we be virtuous and refine our intellect in ways that is very practical, that is very efficient, that is very sustainable? But then how do we bridge that with the abstract and the emotional and the, you know, this frequency that I believe is the birthplace from which all of consciousness is brought forth? And so to me, at least, I think that's part of my work, is like how I've been developing a framework for the nature of consciousness for the last 20 years in a language so that I could help explain to people how they can break things down in such a way to simplify and to open up to this love energy, that which I believe is inherently, you know, what we are. It powers everything that we do, whether or not we're conscious of it or not.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. See, one of the ways that I like to explain this, and this is just, again, my limited perspective, but just how I create coherence out of all all the things that we know, is that this transition that you're talking about, which everybody's aware as ascension, harvest, and the shift, the quantum leap in vibration, and so on. It's easy to understand. It's not something complicated, and all we need to recognize is that we are aware, and by virtue of being aware, we can understand that everything that has come to existence has evolved. That's why science discovered that, yes, there was a nothingness, which we call the Big Bang arbitrarily, and then there has been a series of evolutions, as random they call it. But even if we follow that, one of the things that I actually love, Mike, about the Law of One model, cosmology of the Law of One, is that it brings in two missing links in evolution, right? There's two missing links, which are how did organic molecules suddenly became sort of intelligent as DNA. They just started moving and connecting these things. That's a missing link. And then there is the missing link of primates, humans. How did we become aware? How did we become conscious, right? And now, as you're familiar in the densities of consciousness, we know first to second, right? That's a transition. First, there is just the elements. And then from the elements, as Ra explains, air and fire teach water and earth how to move. And that movement is literally second density. So that's the missing link. Now, how does this happen? Is there really, a teacher fire and a teacher sort of air to water and earth? Well, it's vibration. There is a mechanic to all of this. So to satisfy the intellect here, it's not far-fetched to know and understand that the creation, every logos, every sun has a different music, if you will. That music plays for a certain amount of time, and at a certain point, it changes its melody, and then you get second density. You see, the first melody was first density, the second one changed, and it becomes second. And so third density is the same thing. There was a change in second density, and suddenly those who the planet thought was more appropriate for having itself as self-aware, which were the primates, within just shy of, or actually a little bit more than 1,000 years, in a generation and a half, according to the cosmology of the Law of One, and suddenly, there was self-awareness. Third density arose. Humans came into the planet. Right. So we're going through the same process right now, only that this time there is no change in terms of movement of atoms or self-awareness being bestowed on the primates. In this case, there is just what we're seeing. There is this dawning, like I was saying, of this light, which we call consciousness, radiating from us, right? And that's why I say that the reason why there are few people who are, and it's growing, but few people at the beginning who are awakening, let's say, is because there is a sort of sensitivity in humans, right? In the mind has a sensitivity to this kind of behavior. And over time, the sensitivity is going to become larger and larger, and people are going to awake. In fact, we won't even call it awakening anymore. It would be
it's going to be a normal part of life. It's going to be the reality, which is we just become more empathic as a human race, more connected, we're able to read frequency without the necessity of the intellectual frameworks through which the many operate currently.
Yeah, and we can call it even like how science in the 17th century, science was just, something that only a few people knew and were allowed to.
Right, privy to that kind of right? That knowledge or whatever.
Now you're born into science. Science is a de facto operation here. So in the same way, this knowledge that we're talking about here, which is obscure, it's the same obscurity back in the 1600 and 1700 about philosophical inquiry of the nature of reality. So it's the same thing over and over again, just that this time what's happening is just a massive change in vibratory rates of reality. I mean, this is not even something that you can shy away. That's why I tell people, don't worry, evolution is inevitable. What's important is the experience.
Right. Yeah. There's this activation, whenever one is ready for this opening, this multidimensional, this whatever it is, where the cells, the DNA, whatever it is that opens up, and when it's your time, and there's this beautiful grace and this beautiful unfolding that you can't really intellectualize. Everybody has their own unique unfolding. And, for me, it was spending, 15 years or whatever, and 15, 20 years in contemplation. And then when it was my time, boom, it opened up, and there was a shift. And to be honest with you, it was more than I could manage in my body. It was, I opened up more than my conscious mind or my identity could really sustain in a lot of ways. But for everybody, it's unique and different, because we all have unique and different intents and purposes and goals and so on and so forth. And so you're exactly right. I mean, moving into a different space in the world, spirituality is becoming mainstream, and there's going to be this tremendous movement, I believe, where at some point in the future, where science and religion and spirituality and astrology and politics, everything's going to find its way into this more cohesive, more integrative, more holistic. Because right now things are so separate and everybody has their own little kind of way, right? But because unity is our deepest truth, as we reveal unity more and more and more, and the framework through which unity is all-encompassing, the barriers that have been created in these different streams of experience on this planet will begin to find that there's an interconnected nature to everything. And that will begin to bring down the walls and help people ultimately, as individuals, become more unified in self. And then through time, culture will begin to experience the inherent unity that individuals are living on a moment-to-moment basis.
I agree. And that's why I also emphasize often that I'm so grateful, to be able to experience this point of view that I am in this time, because I gotta confess, I wasn't always like this through my process, because I had my own views in terms of what let's call it the government or the structures, the power structures were. Right. But the more I kind of experienced myself and learned by myself, that allowed me to see how everything is happening in the same way, only slower. You see, the fastest change that can happen in the world is you. And after you change, everything changes, right? So in this particular scenario, I kind of alleviated my frustration with the structures by knowing that, just like it took me time to go through a purging, if you will, of my own thoughts, my own negative thoughts about fear and anger and frustration about reality and how things should be according to my own views and so on. The same thing needs to happen with the planet, with the system that we have, the control system, which, it has been there for thousands of years. It's only transformed. So, and the rate at which it's changing is dramatic as well, so sure. It's that's going to be the beauty of changing, or yeah, the transformation of our social and cultural environment, just to see how it goes through the same process that we did. Because, like you said, the only reality is unity, and once this shines as an inevitable panorama or landscape, you're going to have to conform to that, and I think that's what's happening, and I'm just amazed by the speed of change that everything's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and two, I think the point is, I've been thinking about doing a post about this, but just about the fact that science and politics and all of these different social structures, without mysticism, some of those things can be potentially dangerous in a sense that when people are so caught up in the materialistic viewpoint of reality, we don't really have the perspective to fully recognize that behind the curtain is this like profoundly intelligent dance of love that is unfolding right before us. And I believe that as we develop a greater understanding for what is existing just behind the veil, that it allows us to settle ourselves, because we understand that we don't have to control everything. We don't have to manufacture everything. We don't have to be continuously worrying. We don't have to continue to get caught in these intellectual and physical and monetary power plays. Like, there is a profound love and truth and grace that is just holding all of us and just patiently allowing us to realize that we're love. And as we little by little give to that truth, we can see that there is just so much potential to nurture relationships on this planet, to nurture the environment, to actually be interested in empowering the population, to only take what we need from a tax system in order to facilitate the goodwill of humanity. We can begin to let down these frameworks of these buddy systems in politics and all of the different ways that people are clinging to fear through the mechanism of control, through the mechanism of not being transparent and manipulating perspectives. And so really the cure for humanity on this planet is an awakening of our conscience. It's an awakening of that abiding energy of love that is at the core of what allows us to experience life. It is what we are. And I believe, like you said, little by little, as that reality begins to disseminate on a individual and ultimately a mass level, that a greater sense of heart coherence and global coherence and ability to not to make us all like a Borg or whatever, where we don't have our like individual streams or perspectives or unique ways, but it allows us to begin to read frequency in such a way that we can move with the intelligence of life, that we can work better together through this place of like tremendous reverence for not just ourselves and all of our individual needs in our personal lives, but the environment and, and everything, and that's what I believe, making that commitment to knowing love and knowing truth, is all about. And it's not about being spiritual anymore, because we all come from the same source. We are all spiritual beings, no matter what the way that we identify ourselves is. You know what I mean? It's like you can be the most grounded, the most rational, the most concrete, you know what I mean? You're a fucking spiritual being. That's just what you are, and so the beautiful thing that I feel that is unfolding, is certainly for people like me who are like hyper empathic, is recognizing that I can give myself a space to be able to be openly who I am, and not to feel like I have to hide my spiritual nature or my mystical nature, or even my desire to really connect with just everyday people, just everyday folks in the world, and to just like finally fit in for the first time, because there's an environment that's being cultivated on a global scale to where we are beginning to recognize that the things that used to be, abstract, or that used to be, like you said, kind of hidden away, it's becoming, it's penetrating our daily awareness, and therefore it's giving us all an opportunity to be able to say, hey, okay, the world is changing, and now I have an opportunity to allow my most authentic self to be seen. And I mean, to me, I don't think that there's anything that offers us a greater sense of fulfillment than the ability to be your truest self, like every day, like in the workplace, at home, with your wife, with your kids, at the store, grocery store. Like the ability for us to begin to recognize that you don't have to put that work hat on and to be this like person that fits in a little box, or you don't have to, you know what I mean? So the ability for us to truly live an authentic life is what this fourth density, this learning the love is understanding, it really is all about, is us coming back to our most authentic self, and through our example, giving others the recognition that they too can move into their heart center, and they can be authentic, and they can stop judging themselves, and they can, just be happy, be love, be who and what you are, and what you came here to be, I think.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that. In my experience, it has been the most helpful thing to direct my attention to, as you pointed out several times, yourself, who you are. And getting to investigate that was probably, definitely, I have to say, the most impactful thing in my life, because that's where all the answers lie. Those things that usually have that we have the biggest trouble with is there. It's in knowing who you are, and you don't have to make an effort for that. All you need to do is to become interested in what it is that you are.
That's right. It's curiosity is really at the core of enlightenment.
Right.
It truly is.
Yes. Curiosity, and that interest being also potentiated as well. You have to, that curiosity needs to be, I guess, nurtured might be the right word.
That is.
Because sometimes curiosity is discouraged, especially in our culture. Curiosity is very discouraged.
Sure.
Mostly because of ignorance too. People are afraid of parents, for example, maybe not in a bad sense, but they're afraid to some of the questions because they don't know how to handle them, right? And so our curiosity sometimes is neglected. So yeah, I think that's the biggest cardinal direction that I can suggest to anybody based on my own experience is to just, in whichever way, method possible, just to become really interested in knowing who you are. Because that's it, like you said, what we came here to be, we were already as a kid, as a child. And all that it takes is to, touch again that child, to become, allow that, which it's not like it became, it got into a stasis field and it's just been held there, and it has been expressing over time.
Sure.
So, it's almost like piecing together everything that you have been. This is also why we see that, a lot of the things that happened in my life, brought me to the place I am right now, because that child has always been operating there. It's only that we have kind of neglected to see it in a way. So just getting in touch with, that's why it's important to know, because you start recognizing and saying, yes, this is who I am, and these things are okay, and actually these things that I do, it's not me. So they're not okay, not because they're wrong, but because I don't feel right. It just doesn't align with myself. So getting to know yourself really is the polishing of everything, because that observation that you mentioned a little back ago, that observation point in which you see everything that you are, everything that's happening, this is the key to meditation to me, to observe the mind, to observe what's happening. You begin to see those things. You see the complexity of why you have certain behaviors and certain attitudes and preferences or dislikes or whatever it is. And you're okay with all of that. There's a natural intelligence that flows through us that is able to discern and say, what, after all, I don't think I want to be involved in this at all. I've been doing it, and I never realized that it's just, it just doesn't feel right. And on the same, on the other hand, there is, the recognition that, what, I've been delaying this too much. I'm just going to do it or I'm going to start behaving this way, or I'm going to tell people whatever it is, At least in my case, a lot of these times, just like I want to text somebody or call somebody and say to them, what, I love you. Don't ask me why. I just wanted to tell you that. Or, I just went and did something, wrote something, whatever it is. Just allow these impulses to go through, because you feel them. So knowing the self to me is the key thing for everything. Is, again, going back to the law of one, is the mystical teaching in the law of one, sure, even though it is not thoroughly explored as we would want to, because of the nature of the questionnaire, which was done very scientific, and he wanted to get into a lot of other stuff. Right. But over and over, you can, and this is what I love about the law of one now, is that it's a hidden topic there that you can pick from different places within the material. How Ra was so diligent to give us the information of self-knowledge, of knowing the self, the creator. Right. And so, coupled with the philosophy of non-duality and, of course, the exploration of non-duality, to me, those have been the more impactful tools to be honest. It's not even an achievement. It's just, as you have mentioned, also a recognition of our true being, which is love, which is just serenity, is calmness. It's not this involvement into the neurosis of separation as the creation, right? Sure. And so getting in touch with yourself also brings about this natural state, which is us. If there is any quality that we all share and we can investigate and actually empirically prove and check for ourselves, is equanimity, it's love, it's truth, it's beauty. All these things are inherent in us. These are the things that when you look inside, when you quiet everything, you actually look at the container of your reality, which is you. It's all contained there. And you see everybody. This is why I love doing this exercise with my students. First thing I try to do is go to that place. Tell me how you feel. That's you, right? And when you feel, what you see is is the same feeling. Some people call it peace, other calls it love or an intense energy. Whatever it is, it's always the same thing. And that's the basis of not only ourselves as humans, of the whole reality. And so you look at rocks or the sun or a dog or whatever it is, air, and you say, yes, this is it. You know, this is all me. This is all love. This is all love light, as Rob would say, you see. So again, the inward path is the path that revealed to me all of these intellectual concepts into a practical reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely does. And it's definitely the curiosity piece and the ability to really be self-honest, right? To be able to cultivate the observer and to be able to observe your thoughts and to look at the underneath those thoughts and to recognize where they're coming from and the source of them, to look at the behaviors and recognize the intentionality behind them. And I think when we make those types of commitments to just like truly be radically self-honest, we're able to relieve ourselves of a lot of this, like the busy self, you know, the self that is always either excessively grasping onto things or excessively resisting things. So we're always grasping intellectually for a sense of identity and safety, or we're always resisting things because we don't want to face certain aspects of ourselves. And so I think you're fundamentally right. It's that, you know, that ability to be curious and to like begin to want to look under the hood of the way that you're operating as an individual and see the reasons why you're doing that. And then the ability to, I lost my train of thought. But, you know, just the ability to really begin uncovering all of these different mechanisms that we use to avoid the self, you know, and all of the different ways that we try to attach to things to cope with our fear, to cope with our pain, and to cope with our insecurities. And on a mass scale, you're absolutely right. The majority of people are afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the not knowing, and the not knowing is the deepest self. This frequency of love that is the eternal observer is all things and no thing. It is just what we are, and letting go of that attachment to the intellectual, the limited local intellectual identity, and having the courage to step into the unknown and not always clinging to, you know, that the connection to the mind as a way to feel safe and secure, you know, because the ego wants to have the up, down, right, left. It wants to have the navigation tools to say, this is who I am, and this is where I am, and this is where I feel safe. And when we begin to start peeling away those safety barriers so that we could experience the frequency that drives everything, you know, that's when we start moving into that true self and that frequency, which can be overwhelming. For me personally, there was nothing, I haven't experienced anything more traumatizing than realizing God in my own body, to actually having a frequency of God just blowing through this vehicle for years, and just like looking in the mirror and only seeing God. And just, to me, I mean, it's one thing to intellectualize the spiritual path and to seek unity and to know on an intellectual level that you're God, but then to actually embody God is, for me, was, you know, it was pretty fucking terrifying. And it's certainly taken a lot on my personal journey to ground it and to learn how to apply this frequency in ways that are that fit into a certain physical framework in the world that will allow me to put it to use in such a way that I could support the growth of others.
Yeah, totally. Completely agree with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, one of the topics that I wanted to, took a few notes on this, And I think it's fitting because, I mean, obviously how I came across your work was the Law of One. And I think it's really beautiful that you were able to, you put out, looks like you've got 153 videos on YouTube, and your YouTube channel is Gaia Awakens. And some of the primary teachings in the Law of One are the recognition that there are paths of evolution that folks take in their journey to evolving spiritually, and the framework that the Ra uses is service to self and service to others. And I've talked about this before, and you can maybe kind of go into this a little bit, but for the listeners, I really feel like we are transitioning into that space where we're moving into a new density, but I still think that there's a lot of work going on because there's so many people who are in a confused space, and part of bringing this circle of our conversation to a point where we're saying that, the most important thing on the spiritual path is knowing the self. And I think it is that knowing of self, or learning of self, or surrendering to self, that really allows us to get clear on, what our evolutionary path is, moving from a space where we have a lot of distortions in our beliefs and our behaviors, and we're not cohesive in the way that we operate, meaning that our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors aren't in alignment. We're not congruent as individuals, the way we show up in life. And so part of learning the self is learning how to show up congruently and being in integrity, right? More so, and giving ourselves the space through loving allowance when we're not in integrity to recognize that we are infinitely evolving beings, and it's okay to not be in integrity all the time. But that's what growth is about. That's what spiritual growth is about. That's what personal growth is about. And so my point is, as we learn the self, we recognize what our orientation is. And the beautiful thing about the framework of the raw material, in my estimation, is it gives people the freedom to say, okay, the majority of people on this planet are service to others, but a lot of them are very confused still. So they haven't really taken that full path on to service to others because they're still in a very confused state. But the point I'm making is the ability to recognize that God, the universe, allows us to have this path of service to self, which is more, if you utilize it from a dualistic point of view, it's more of the negative path, or the path that utilizes other people and the environment as a way to empower the self. It allows us to begin to move past some of these old archaic frameworks of good and evil, and God and the devil, and that there's this externalized force that we have to be afraid of. And it allows us to contextualize our reality in such a way that we can see that everything is God, even if it isn't operating from the orientation that we are polarized towards or that we agree with, right?
Yeah, well, this is a massive question.
I get it, but I thought it would be important for us to kind of close out this podcast with kind of a real, almost a bow tie, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, but in a way, we have laid the background for this already,
right?
And since we talk about, and that's also the intention of my work and my purpose, is to simplify the complexity, the apparent complexity of things. Right. I mean, you just explained beautifully the philosophy of service to others and service to self. You see, we've been talking about how that junction, I told you, so two different things. The service, what we call the service to self path, is not necessarily, even though that is the biggest influence that we have, let's just put it like the system in which our society thrived, so to speak, and developed, was a service to self system, meaning that everybody could go through the process of competition and fighting against each other and so on. But the vast majority, like you also pointed out, is service to others. So that's why not many people have taken advantage of the system to grow a bigger elite, to call it one way, right?
Right.
Which is actually the word that Ra uses as well, even in thousands of years ago in Egypt and so on, the elite. So yes, this it is an available polarity, and while there is, a path for people to go through it, the vast majority of people, when we talk about what Ra calls the sinkhole of indifference, is what I think is the side effect of having this very numbed society. That's the best word I can find, where people don't know. There is just a lot of ignorance in terms of what are their options. And most of us grew up thinking, well, I'm just going to have a family and have this. And, you grew up with the sort of pattern of life.
Right.
And the way that's affecting our society is just that we don't have a direction. But this is where, this new age basically is coming in to say, yes, there is an option, and this is your polarity, basically. This is who you are. Right. So there is always a stronger attraction to the positive polarity, to service to others, than there is to service to self. So yeah, that's the junction that I was also talking about. When people realize that there is an option, but also, like you mentioned, that most of their lives they have been criticizing themselves for being, sort of negative or all of this. That is part of you, because you are not this angel being who is just here to be light. You're both. You're everything. Everything. When you look at yourself in the mirror, this is the sort of shadow work that is so prominent right now, because it's the same Carl Jung's, shadow self that needs to be absorbed and accepted and loved. So in the law of one is the same thing. Just go through the process of knowing. And a lot of people say, well, but I don't know what I'm going to be if I accept the dark side of myself. Sure. And the thing is that you become so much more powerful, in the sense of feeling whole. See, that's what the word holy comes from. You're whole. So being whole is that, reconciling your dark side. And yeah, the law of one lays it out in a way that you can say, yes, it's not so much the dark side of being evil, but just that some behaviors are simply behaviors, and I just need to get in touch with them and see how they can empower my true polarity, right? Because we do live in a dualistic environment, so we need to come to terms with that. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot more to explore there, but that would be my brief summary.
No, I agree with you. And even on your Instagram account, you got the yin and yang, which is something that I definitely align with in terms of the symbolism of that, and helping people to begin to understand that that everything is essentially God, and that the light is the masculine energy, the energy of information, the energy of the physical universe, if you will. The darkness is the non-physical, is kind of more the feminine energy. This is the life force. This is the sexual, creative life force. And so when we have the ability to begin to give ourselves permission to explore the inner feminine self and the masculine framework, that and be able to bring those into a greater sense of harmony, then we're able to explore and express and reveal and embody ultimately everything that we are, right? And that's a beautiful unfolding, to begin to see that we don't have to feel victimized by the universe, but that we are the universe, and that we give ourselves the space to empower ourselves to be co-creators in a reality that is a participating reality. It's a reality of participating co-creators, and to take accountability for our portion of the dance, but to recognize as well that we don't have to beat ourselves up, and we don't have to hold the world on our shoulders. That's certainly what I've been learning over the years on my path. So
I like that.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And you're an extremely beautiful being, and I'm so thankful that that I was able to connect with you here on the show, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a very pleasant hour with you, I gotta say. I love your insights. I love your story, what you have been through. It's always nourishing to meet people like you who have such a different way that have approached this, and the work that you're doing is commendable as well. As you know, somebody who is just an equal of you in this the same enterprise of just expressing what we have, and we just feel that urge to tell people it's a commendable work, and man, it's a rewarding one too. So thank you for being you. Thank you for what you do. And most than anything, just thank you for the honor of hanging out with me and chatting about these things that we were excited about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that's what this paradigm is about helping people to move in a place where they can relieve themselves of this fixed, limited framework of how we can live our lives, how we can make money, and moving into a space where, at an earlier age, people can begin recognizing who they are, what they're here to do, and how we can all as individuals find a way to earn a living doing and being exactly who we are, instead of just going out in the world and earning a paycheck and going home and being miserable and finding different ways. So I think it's wonderful to see what you're doing, the mentoring that you're doing, all the stuff you're doing on YouTube, and that you have transformed in a very expedited manner into a lifestyle that is in alignment with who you are and what you're here to do. So I see you, I recognize you, appreciate you, and love you, man.
Love you too, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate it. Well, until next time, my friends, stay thirsty for life.